All right, everyone. Review Realm here, and the 2020 album reviews continue with ones that were released earlier in the year that we want to address before the year comes to a close.
Yeah, we talked about the last review that we have a handful we want to talk about. Some of these I have a feeling that are definitely in our top 10, which I'm kind of excited about our top 10s in the future because I know not all of them we have reviewed.
It's all going to be leading up to that at the end of the year. Top 10 albums for each of us. If you like what you see, if you like to enjoy album reviews, definitely hit the subscribe button here. So let's get on with the show. I know this is one that you definitely wanted to talk about, Sam. So we have Haken's sixth album, Virus. How appropriate for 2020.
I hate this. I said I need a green screen for this.
We can see it there.
Vinyl.
I think they said that it was just coincidental that the album was called Virus and it happened to come out in 2020.
It was very coincidental. It was pretty exciting. John, I don't know if you know this, but in terms of bands that put out albums, there are very few I think I get more excited for than a Dream Theater release, and Haken has become one.
Yeah, and I had not really listened to them before. And I think the one part I regret about this album is that I found out it's loosely connected to the last album they did, which was 2 years ago, Vector. I wanted to ask you, in what ways did you find any connections when you listened to Virus compared to Vector?
I did not. I didn't listen to, unfortunately, most of my listenings are usually done while I'm working. So this album, I didn't hear anything off the bat. I know if you ask Ken, who's been on this channel before, he can point things out that I haven't noticed. The album covers look pretty similar.
Haken's a band that I had not really heard before this album, and I gotta be honest, I was pleasantly surprised with this album. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I had no idea what they sounded like, really, so I knew that they were progressive. To hear this really nice combination of some heavy music behind it, and then this vocalist, I mean, it was an excellent combination. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I discovered them about 10 years ago, maybe in high school, just out of high school, when their album Visions came out.
I think one thing I saw that the singer said about this album is that Virus, it can be enjoyed as a standalone album. It still works loosely with Vector. The album, I think, and it was the first single too, opens up with Prosthetic. Great opening track. It
sounds like your average progressive song that you would hear on many other progressive albums, but again, Haken has been able to take the genre, I think, they have the torch right now in terms of just being a progressive band. Yeah, they're a heavier band, but they're kind of just more progressive than they are metal. And I think this track definitely showcased what their talent and what they offer.
Invasion was cool too. I think the highlight for me for this album, it was the longest song on the album too, was Carousel.
Carousel was one of my, I love the flow of that song. That's another thing about this whole album, and every single song flows.
Yeah, it's a nice flow between all of the songs, and not even just the ones that are Messiah Complex. Those all flow into one another, obviously, because they're titles. But even the other half of the album, songs 1 through 5, they all flow into each other really nicely.
I don't think there was a downstroke on all of this album. I always have a personal knack with bands that release their slower bits, or this this song at the end.
That was probably the one part of the album where it was for me, it was Only Stars.
You know what? It's the end of the album, and I think with the way the album does build up, I'm okay with it being the song that fizzles out the rest of the album. Definitely, I think, the weakest track on the album, but it's not horrible. It's just something that feels like it fizzles out a little differently than I was expecting, especially when you have songs like Invasion.
Invasion was one of the singles. I know Canary Yellow was one of the singles too.
Canary Yellow was a little more mellow, but it works from right into Messiah Complex. It just helped the album continue flowing. Since
they had those songs, towards the second half of the album that all went into each other, which was your favorite Messiah Complex?
Ooh, that's tough. So might be part 3 or 4. I know they're on the shorter end. For me, that I almost treat that as one song, but if you were to ask me, it was part 3, 4.
I think my favorite was A Glutton for Punishment, which had me thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger for some reason. It's what are you, a glutton for punishment? All the songs in that Messiah Complex flow into each other really nicely. They're all on the shorter end too, because I think probably because of the intention of having them flow into one another. I think, except for the last one, which is a little bit longer, Ectobius Rex.
I think I did the math today. This is over 15 minutes long, this whole movement. Could be 17, 18. I don't have anything bad to say about this album. Besides Only Stars being what it was at the end. I think as a whole, I loved it as a fan. I think it's a good introduction to progressive music, straight up progressive music. If you're not a big
definitely, yeah,
prog fan, because there's a lot of, we've had this discussion before between Dream Theater We've talked Periphery before. We've talked bands that are progressive, but they use technical progressive elements. I think this is a good, solid album that introduces people into just progressive music. This is very friendly to anybody, plus the old fans.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think this is a nice introduction to like that side of music. You know, you're introduced to something that's musically like, you know, that's on the heavier side. But then you hear like vocalist Ross Jennings. You hear that kind of vocal style with this kind of music. It's not something you typically hear, really. So I think somebody that is fairly new to this side of the genre might start to take an interest to it.
Actually, interestingly enough, on their first album, Aquarius, he actually growls on a couple of the tracks.
I was like waiting for it too. I was like waiting for it in one of the songs. You know, they don't on this album, but I was wondering if that was something they did, since I didn't really know anything about the band before. I'm gonna have to go back to earlier works. Like I'm gonna have to listen to Vector, like to see what I can pick out. You know, that sounds similar to this album.
I would listen, in your case, and anyone who hasn't listened to them before, without straying far from the album itself, I would listen to The Mountain, Affinity, and Vector. Those last 3 albums, bar none, just solid music all the way through.
Yeah, you hear a lot of different like instruments and everything throughout this album too. Yeah, I enjoyed listening to this album. I'd probably give it, 8 out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Yeah.
It caught my attention. It's been on my rotation throughout the year. Dude, this album it's great. It's great. I don't even know what else to tell you guys. If you're not familiar with Haken, listen to it. Listen to it all the way through.
Yeah, this is one, I'm saying again, like I was pleasantly surprised with. Definitely one I would sit down and listen to. Definitely an album that we're both happy with. What do you guys think of Virus? What do you think of Haken? I thought that was funny. They put on their Facebook pages, it says Haken, and then it's like, pronounced Taken 1, Taken 2.
I didn't know how to pronounce it I thought it was like Haken. And then I saw that, I'm like, oh, that was very helpful.
When I was like first hearing about the band, like I think you had like a T-shirt maybe or something like that. When I read the shirt in my head, I was like, Haken? I was like, what? I was reading, and I didn't want to say it out loud because I was like, all right, that's probably not how it's pronounced. But then I heard you say Haken. I said, okay, now I know. I don't have to ask.
Just something to keep in mind going into the future, into 2021. I believe the Ross Jennings actually has a solo album that he just finished recording.
Mm-hmm.
I love his voice. I think he has a great voice. I think he has a very unique voice.
Yep.
And I think in lieu of next year, when we start cataloging things to cover in review, we should review his solo album.
Yeah, so that's our thoughts on Virus, the newest album from Haken. Be sure to share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. And like I said, if you enjoy album reviews like this, we got a few more coming this year before the year is out, followed by a top 10 from each of us. So we'll see you for the next review.